Welcome, friends, to Unity of Fort Myers virtual service. We appreciate you being with us today, and we acknowledge the fact that you've got many choices before you, and you chose us today, so we know something extraordinary is about to happen. We know we will be changed forever for you being a part of the service and vice versa. I'm Reverend Carla McClellan, and I am delighted to be your minister this morning.
There's one power, invisible, and just see it everywhere and every day. One power indescribable, and just speak of it with every word you say. Mysterious until you know the truth. As simple as the love inside of you. Call it God, call it Spirit, call it Jesus, call it Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, angel's wings or heaven's door, but whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? It's the power of the love in you and me. We speak so many languages, different clothing, different colors, different names. But different is only dangerous when we forget that in the heart we're all the same. And we'll remember once we close our eyes to see that such distances were never meant to be. Call it God, call it Spirit or Jesus or Lord, call it Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Hashem or Heaven's Door. It's Muhammad, it's your mind, it's your soul or it's your sign. It's the universe, it's music, Mother Earth or Father Time. But whatever name you give it, it's all one power, can't you see? Whatever name you give it, it's the very air we breathe. It's the power of the love in you and me. One power, yeah. One power. One power is what we are. It's the moment of creation. It's an everlasting peace. It's the freedom of forgiveness. It's the sweetness of release. It's the joy of inspiration. It's the sunshine on your face. It's the birthright of all nations. It's the boundlessness of space. It's the beauty of a baby. The serenity of sleep. It's the anchor we abandon. For it's love that's most deep. It's one power. Oh, what we are is one power. It's the power of the love that lives forever in you and me. It's the power of the love in you and me.
Here at Unity of Fort Myers, we have many classes, events, prayer, and ways to connect at this time. Find all of these on our website, our Facebook page, or the weekly email. Reverend Carla, me, is available to you on Thursdays. Simply text me to set up a time. However, Monday, I'm flying back down to Fort Myers, so you can visit me in person. Join us right after the service for our virtual coffee hour. Unity was founded upon prayer. We are committed to the power of prayer to shift our awareness of reality. Our prayer chaplains are here for you. You can send in your prayer requests, email, call the office, put them in chat. You can also call Silent Unity. They are available almost 24/7. Let us open our service this morning in prayer, acknowledging there is one presence and one power. And that presence and power is found around us and within us. That presence and power sources us with life, with love, with abundance, with health. And as we open ourselves up to a greater understanding of the power that presence gives us, love, we begin to expand ourselves into an understanding of a new reality, a new heaven, and a new earth. And in this willingness to do life differently, we begin our service today, knowing that as we express love, we are creating sacred community and sacred time. Amen. Hello, my friends. I'm once again with our wisdom teacher, Reverend Robert Brumet, and we are taking a look at birthing a new reality. Because really, that's what we're in the process of doing right now. None of us knows the way, but we have mile markers along the way of how to evolve our consciousness. Robert Brumet is a teacher, a writer, a spiritual director. He conducts a variety of retreats and seminars and travels all over the United States and the Caribbean. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Carla. It's a delight to be back again.
So as we continue on with mapping out the evolution of consciousness, why don't you give us a quick review of what we talked about last week?
Okay. In Unity, we teach that God is within us, and we're starting with that premise, and we're also expanding upon that to say God is not only within us, but God is evolving through us. So the evolution of consciousness is the process of our awareness of God evolving through us, getting greater and greater all the time. And as such, then we become conscious of our own evolution. Then we become responsible for directing evolution. Rather than being a puppet of a higher force, we are co-creators with God, so to speak. And that we are now in a very crucial juncture in our human history, that we can no longer rely upon the mind alone to find the solutions for us. That our survival depends upon not just a new way of doing the same old thing, but it depends upon awakening to our true nature. So we're being forced into awakening, so to speak. So that I think it's part of the great divine plan to force us to wake up. Right?
To wake up. And to wake up to what, Robert?
To wake up to who and what we really are, to wake up to the fact that we are divine beings, we are God in evolution, and that it's time for us to become more aware of our divinity and to become more active in directing the evolutionary process on the planet. I was going to say, just up till now, the mind we have been identified with the mind rather than with our divine potential. We've been identified with the human mind, and we often call that as the ego. The ego is our sense of self in a mental structure. So the ego means I means basically self-concept, the mental self-concept. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not who we are. See, that we are divine beings. We are not mental beings.
Yeah, yes. Another thing that you point out in the book in this chapter is that there really isn't a fight between science and theology, if you will. That evolution has some mile markers along the way, but neither what am I trying to say? Neither crosses out the other one's validity.
Exactly.
Am I saying that right?
Exactly. If we talk about legitimate science, science is interested in the external world, how things work in the external world. It's interested in how, but not why. It's not interested in ultimate meaning or purpose. It's simply a description of how the universe works from a physical point of view. Religion or theology is about how our inner life operates, how the divine operates in and through us in terms of our own intuition, our own understanding process. Those two do not overlap because our religion, our spirituality per se, is not trying to define how the physical world should or shouldn't be. It's simply saying this is about experiencing myself internally as the divine. So the two of them, if you think of awareness being cut in between internal and external, science is in charge of the external world. Religion is in charge, if you will, of the internal world, religion and psychology. And so there is no real fight between those two until religion tries to define what science is supposed to do, or science tries to do what religion is supposed to do. Science cannot tell us if there is or is not a God, and it never will, you see. Religion cannot tell us whether or not we evolved from apes or penguins or anything else, you see. That's for science to determine. So, rightly understood, they're like the left hand and the right hand, the external and the internal working together.
It's a beautiful description. That is the left hand and the right hand working together rather than one opposing the other or saying, this is the only way. So in this chapter, we're talking about evolutionary mile markers. Do you want to say more about that?
Yes. And what I do in that second chapter is take a look at some of the greatest thinkers of our time and how they have looked at the evolution of consciousness, how they have framed the evolution of consciousness. I'll start with Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Some of the folks may be familiar with him. He was a Catholic priest, a Jesuit, and a man of faith and a man of science, both. And he saw that science studies the externality of evolution, the evolution of biological forms, but it doesn't study the interior nature of them. He saw that the externality was only half of an organism. Every organism has a consciousness, we would call it. He called it interiority. So the difference between a worm and a dolphin is not just in physical form, but there's a greater interiority in the dolphin than there is in the worm. And so consciousness evolves on the interior and on the exterior. And the relationship between the two is that as the exterior gets more complex, it allows greater interiority to manifest. So that's why it takes a complex brain to house a complex consciousness. That if we had the skeletal structure of a fish, we could not possibly think the way we think. It requires the brain that we have. But the consciousness does not come from the brain. Consciousness is there. It functions through the brain. And again, it's like the right hand and the left hand, you see. It's like the cell phone and the message. The two of them are required to hear, you see. Cell phone being the exterior part of it, and the voicemail or the voice message or the text message being the interior part of it.
Might the interior part be referred to as soul?
It is, if you talk about soul existing in all life forms, yes. That every life form has a soul, and that soul expands in awareness as the interiority grows. So, yeah, that's a great term for it. Mm-hmm.
So we've got Teilhard de Chardin, and what I remember most about him, actually, from your class, is he talked about the peduncle, and I just love the word peduncle. Would you describe that to our listeners, that what he felt like new forms emerging from the old?
Yeah, it's like when a species seems to have reached the end of the road, so to speak, like it's gone as far as it has, you go no further, then it either dies out or something new shoots up. Like in peduncle literally means stem or like a new shoot. And that new shoot is a breakthrough into a new level of awareness. So for example, with the apes, the apes seemed like for some reason, how they were living was not enough. Otherwise, they would have died out. So thought was evolved. Thought was born. And thinking is more than simply instinct. It's something totally different altogether. Well, conversely, we've taken thinking about as far as it can go. Quantum mechanics, quantum science is telling us that, reality can't be understood by the thinking mind. And so we've reached the limit of human thought. And so that may end us right there. Or we may have this peduncle come through that says there's a higher level, there's a stem leading into a higher level of being. Right now, I think we're at the point where we're either going to close over or the shoot's going to arise, which I believe that it will. But it's certainly not a given. It's not automatic by any means.
So who else were the evolutionary consciousness markers that you have studied?
Well, Teilhard was one. There was another called John Gebser, which is a beautiful. And I don't have time to go into all of his theories, but basically he identified 5 structures of consciousness. And one of the interesting things was that each structure of consciousness has a different sense of reality. So in other words, the primal people did not just see the same world we see in 8 different things and 4 different clothing. They lived in a totally different reality than we lived in. But the world they lived in was not the same world that we live in, because their awareness was very different than ours. So as we evolve from one structure to the next, the world changes. Our whole reality changes, because self and the world, again, are like the left hand and the right hand. They both arise at the same time. So who I am and what the world is, who I am and what reality is inseparable. So as I change, my world changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And reminds us of the third principle, the law of mind action, that as we change what we're focusing our attention on, our perception of something, as we change that, then our reality, our experience of it shifts and morphs into something else.
Absolutely. So we're literally not living in the same world. We're not living in the old world in a new way. We're living in a new world.
In a new world, right. So talk to me a bit about spiral dynamics.
Yeah, that's something that is very popular today and very, very helpful. It's not, it is about the evolution of consciousness in a different way, however, from what Gebser and Teilhard were talking about it, but it's the evolution of our value systems, how our world views. So Claire Graves really was the pioneer of this, and then Don Beck was the one that promoted it and made it popular and gave it a lot of practical applications and uses. And he's done a lot of great work with that. So basically what it is, it's thinking of our value systems and our worldviews as having various structures, and they color coded them. So that was one of the handy things. For example, like the red consciousness is the consciousness of the tribal warlord. That it's, I want it, therefore it's mine. Red consciousness is amoral, and it just says might is right. Red consciousness is like a 2-year-old. So if you can imagine a 2-year-old in charge of, and I'm not going to go there about contemporary politics.
No.
So I'm talking about in the past. If you could imagine, for example, like maybe Attila the Hun or something like that. They just did what they wanted to do because it served their purpose. There was no morality connected with it. Then, because that's ultimately self-destructive, if everybody in the world lived at red consciousness, we'd all kill one another before the end of the day. So blue consciousness is the next layer, was one that says, wait a minute, there's a higher power. There's something greater than ourselves to think about. And so you're not here just to satisfy your own whims and needs, but you're here to serve a higher power. And that higher power can be a religious power, or it can be a government, a patriotism kind of a thing, like the fatherland or the motherland or something like that. But the higher power is one that is more like Christian fundamentalism, or actually any type of fundamentalism, Islam or Christian, Judaic, or whatever. But the fundamentalism says that there is a higher power and it's in charge of your life, and you answer to it. So then the next level, which was the orange level, was the level of science and reason. So if you can think of the Middle Ages was classic blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Renaissance came along. And then that's when orange began to emerge. Actually, it emerged in the Greek-Roman civilizations, but our art, the one we're connected with, came from the Renaissance. And so people began to think for themselves, painting and world travel, and it was no longer about relying on authority, but it's making ourselves authorities. It's like you're an authority and I'm an authority, because what's true, what the greatest authority is what can be proven to be true by thinking and testing the scientific method. So then, and still to this day, the orange meme pretty much reigns supreme. The orange meme is the meme of the mind. The blue meme is the meme of the heart. The red meme is the meme of the instincts.
Yeah.
And so the head,
sort of our reptilian part of our brain.
In a sense, yes. And then we saw in the 60s and 70s the evolution, the emergence of the green. That was an example, a perfect example of a peduncle coming up. The 1960s was one big peduncle in one sense, that in the green movement came up. And the green movement was counter to the orange movement, because orange was just practical science and it had no values. And green says, hey, wait a minute, science is legitimate, but it has to have a heart. So it's like green is trying to bring the head and the heart together. And green is basically what most people in the unity culture are in, the green dimension, the dimension of equal rights for everyone and so forth. And then the next tier is the tier that sees, it's not necessarily a spiritual dimension, but it's a transpersonal dimension. It goes beyond the sense of self as being identified with any one of those other colors, but seeing that they're all right. So it's the ability to have multiple perspectives.
Yes.
That's really the crux of what second tier is.
And that's what we want to birth to. That's where we want our peduncle to shoot up, is in that second tier.
Exactly. And that's really, in a sense, that's what compassion is. Compassion is when we're able to see from multiple viewpoints. I can see from your perspective, I can see from somebody else's perspective. And I don't have to give up my own either.
Right. There's room for everything.
Exactly.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about too today was the evolution of the Bible and how it is, how it's been used as a place of certainty and uncertainty.
Indeed, yeah. And this was something the Fillmores worked with extensively. I don't necessarily think they developed it, but they certainly helped it to grow, helped it to develop. And that is the idea that the old, what we call the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible, is symbolic of the subconscious mind. So the Old Testament chronicles the evolution of the subconscious mind from Adam at the very beginning, which is more like the red man, if you will, the red meme, if you will, and Moses all the way up to, he ends the Old Testament. Moses is the highest level of development in the Old Testament. Moses represents our awareness of the law of cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Adam either obeyed God or disobeyed God, mm-hmm. whereas Moses understood the law of cause and effect and brought the law to the people. And so he was considered the highest figure. Then came John the Baptist, who's a transitional figure. John was identified with the mind, as was Moses, but he also had a glimpse of the superconscious. And he said, there's someone greater than myself coming along. don't worship me because I will die, I will diminish. Something much greater will come along. Jesus then represents the beginning of the superconsciousness. So Jesus represents the superconsciousness, and his story is the evolution of the superconscious in the world through his birth, the baptism, transfiguration, the ascension, and so forth. And then the New Testament ends with the New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So the Old Testament, the focus is on finding Jerusalem, finding the Old Jerusalem. The New Testament ends with finding the New Jerusalem. The New
Jerusalem. And that might be a good place for us to end today.
Yeah.
Before we go into the next place of mistaken identity. So I love that you brought out that the Old Testament was the Old Jerusalem, and the New Testament brings forth the New Jerusalem. It bursts a greater reality than what was destroyed.
Exactly.
And I love this. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them as their God, and they will be his peoples. And God himself shall be with them." Revelations 21 verses 1 through 3. So yes, we're birthing this new earth, this new heaven, this new earth in this process. And Robert, I'm wondering now if you would be willing to take us into a meditation.
I would love to do that. Thank you. So in our meditation time, I invite you to become quiet and still, gently closing the eyes and taking a few deep breaths. And just imagine that God, as a seed, has been planted within your soul. Like a tiny mustard seed, maybe, that's been planted in the soil of your humanness. Your human nature is the soil for this soul seed. And then imagine as your life unfolds, this seed breaking open, sprouting, growing, coming forth, shooting into the sunlight, and growing bigger and bigger, growing branches, growing leaves, growing flowers, and eventually bearing fruit. So know that every experience in your life is part of this soil, part of the water, part of the fertilizer, everything it takes to grow. So your humanness is the mud, the worms, the bugs. The sunshine is the superconsciousness. And our soul is the flower that grows with its roots in our human nature and flowers in the sunlight of the divine. So I just invite you to rest with this picture, this image in your own mind and heart. Just feeling the sunlight coming upon you, and at the same time feeling your roots deep in the earth. You are deeply human. You are deeply divine. You are a divine being unfolding as a human being. So blessing this human experience and all that it holds. We'll rest in the silence for a few moments, holding that image, holding this awareness of God unfolding in it and through us. And so even when it rains, we know that that rain nourishes the growth. The sun shines, it nourishes the growth. Every experience in your life and mine is for the purpose of our growth. If we keep our mind and our heart open, we stay aware and awake. And if we live in God's love, with gratitude. So I say thank you for this experience of being together today. Thank you, God, and amen.
Amen. Thank you, Robert.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Let us listen together the words of our Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from error. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. We are so grateful for your support at this unusual time. There are multiple ways for you to support our work. You can text, and here is a web link that can be used to donate from a mobile device or an iPad. So let's imagine together, my friends, that we are blessing our offering. And that as we imbue our offering in our mind with the love that we have, we say, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give. And I am grateful. Now's our time to bless our children all over the world. So let's rub our hands together and let's say, you are loved, special, and important. We behold and bless the Christ you are. And now in closing, let us raise up the vibration on planet Earth. Let us connect by saying, let there be peace on earth. And let it begin with us. Closing with the prayer for protection, we say together, the light of God surrounds us. I am that light. The love of God enfolds us. I am that love. The power of God protects us. I am that power. The presence of God watches over us. I am that presence. Wherever I am, God is, and all is well. See you next week, my friends. Until then, be blessed.
say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 'Cause I'm so grateful. So grateful. Oh, grateful. I'm so grateful. So I want to say thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. This healing, this healing, this healing day. This healing, this healing, this healing day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. This healing, this healing, this healing day. This healing, this healing, this healing day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this beautiful day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this beautiful day. Thank you for my friends, Spirit. Thank you for my friends. Thank you for my friends, Spirit. Thank you for my friends. My wonderful, my wonderful, my wonderful friends. My wonderful, my wonderful, my wonderful friends. Now thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. This healing, this healing, this healing day. This healing, this healing, this healing day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this day, Spirit. Thank you for this day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this beautiful day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this beautiful day. I want to say thank you. Thank you. I want to say thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. 'Cause I'm so grateful. So grateful. So grateful. So grateful. So grateful. So grateful. I'm so grateful. So grateful. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. Just thank you. Thank you. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 'Cause I'm so grateful. Yeah. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I want to just say thank you now. Just thank you now.